What is shaken? Welcome to this episode of the Wind Up Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to give it a like and subscribe or follow the show wherever you're consuming your podcasts. You can also follow us on any of our social networks. That's on YouTube, Instagram, the Book of Face, and the social network formerly known as Twitter. The handle on all of those will be at MTGA Wines. You can head to our website, mtgawines.com. Scroll down to the bottom of that homepage. You can fill out the little form there and submit questions, ideas, and thoughts for the show to dive into in future episodes. While you're there, you can also find out a little bit more about us, our wines, and all the goings on that we have around the country and, of course, here in the Napa Valley. In the news this week, that is where we are headed. Welcome back, everybody, to the Wind Up Podcast. God, it was last week's episode was a little hectic. It was all kind of after a month off. It was just, man, was so much stuff to like rattle through. This week, we've got a couple of clean topics. I think we're going to be able to dive into a couple of things and probably stay a little bit more focused. You know me, I can be a little bit like, ooh, squirrel, and then go down a random tangent every once in a while. Happens probably more often than not, certainly more often than I'd like to admit, but I've got my notes in front of me. I think that we're going to be just fine. I think we've got this, don't you? There's actually, when it comes to the news in the wine industry, it's kind of more the same. I think none of you are going to be particularly surprised that the wine industry is still very much in flux between what businesses are doing well, which ones are going under, the mergers and acquisitions that are happening, the distributors that are falling apart. It's just more of the same. And everybody is still shaking their crystal ball as hard as they can, trying to figure out which way is up and where the trends are going so that we can somehow move forward efficiently. It's certainly one of those times where failing fast is a big deal, and being nimble is an even bigger deal, to be able to move on and change and adapt on the fly. That seems to be the common thread across any of our industry colleagues that we talk to regarding the state of the industry, how they're doing, their expectations for where things are going to go. There's a lot of people, just like including ourselves, that are very, very much trying to do anything and everything that we can to further ourselves within the business and stay afloat, And one of the bigger issues that continues to kind of plague the industry is rising costs. There's a brief article through the drinks business regarding how, particularly when it comes to like hospitality businesses like bars, restaurants, tasting rooms, whatever, how can it help, adapt to rising costs and, be maybe a little bit more nimble with things. It's very applicable to what we do in the wine industry. We touched on this in the last episode actually as well, regarding like vineyard contracts and what people are paying for fruit, reducing production so that we can play catch up on inventory, reduce our costs for a given year, all that kind of stuff. Like that all factors into this. And I had a great conversation. It was via email, kind of back and forth, and with another colleague after the fact, trying to plan an event for like a corporate group out here. And it was going to be a 40-ish, like 30, 40 person event. And there's a little back and forth between like our pricing and our expectation of like wine to sell. And she very rightfully so was like, hey, there are other producers that, will do this for cheaper. I said, and it was like, yeah, okay, then go for it. Like that's fine. But we know what our costs are. We know what our sales expectation is for some of the events that we do. Frankly, over the last few years, and some of you that listen to this have been so kind to host some of these events and help promote our wines and get them in front of more people. And we've sold a lot of wine that way. There are also a handful of events that certainly we didn't hardly sell anything, that we took a hit on those. And that was kind of fine, like in the moment of like, we just need to try and drum up some business. Let's take some chances. But it's gotten to a point where, we can't bear the cost burden of all this all the time. We have to dig our heels in a little bit. At the same time, we're trying to reduce some of those costs for folks to do more events like this. If we could come out and, for, a case of wine or two, do an event for 30 or 40 people, then yeah, of course, we would do it in a heartbeat. But, between our time, the samples we're going to go through, even if it's a local event that we're doing here, I mean, our expectation is that we're there to sell wine. That's kind of the thing. Like, there's not a specific, hey, you must, actually, there kind of is. There is like you must buy X amount of cases for us to show up. That's typically how it works. Because it's a lot of work. We have to pour through samples. It's our time. We do have to expect and kind of bank on the idea that, hey, it's great exposure for us to do some of these events. But if that exposure costs us money and down the line, these folks that we get in front of don't buy anything, now we're the ones taking a hit. As good as the opportunity might be, we're the one, we can't afford to take that hit right now. If we have a couple of misses in a month when it comes to events, even one big one, I mean, that's a big problem. And it's not just the cost of, the event itself and our time. It's also the opportunities that don't come as a result. This is something that, some of you, none of you have done this. Like, you guys are good. We're like those, if you're listening to this, we're good. But this is something that, marketers will do, because having been on a marketing team plenty of times, or trying to, not just for MTGA, but other folks of, what kind of activations are we trying to do and to increase sales, with the rising cost of everything, hospitality, wine production and whatnot. If we're going to continue doing these events, like, these need to pay off at a certain point. If we do have, a big marketing budget, then yeah, maybe we can be a little bit more flexible. Maybe the minimum buy-in can be a little bit less from clients, all that good stuff. If you're going to be banking on exposure and impressions, I mean, you're banking on the hope that people are going to come back to you at some point and buy a wine. And I can tell you firsthand that in the 10 years now, it's been 10 years since I really started going on the road and doing events. And there are plenty of folks that will echo this within the wine industry and many industries, is that if we get the sale from you today, we got you. You're a customer now. Like, it worked. I hate to say this, and some of you may be guilty of this, and it's no harm, no foul. It just is what it is, because we understand. Like, you're not necessarily going to go and buy cases and cases of wine from everywhere. You might be like, we bought from, our favorite places. We went to this wine dinner, this wine event. We bought some more wine. But now we got to ratchet that back. So the next tasting we go to, we're like, hey, we're going to bring your order form back with us. We'll check you out online and we'll sign up after the fact. I can tell you that in 10 years of being on the road and doing events around the country as well as locally here in Napa, in 10 years, on less than one hand, can I count the number of people that have actually come back and signed up later on down the road or bought wine later on down the road. It is so few and so far between. It makes doing marketing events just for exposure or impressions not worth it. It's just the case. And we follow up with via email, via text, we call. We try not to pester people too much. But it is really all about getting people in the door and, frankly, spending some hard-earned money in that moment. Because the second you leave our winery, the second you leave that event, again, whether it's on the road or locally, it's incredibly unlikely that folks will come back for a second purchase if they don't purchase that first time in the moment. Like, the probability is basically zero. So, we continue to keep people on our mailing list and things of that nature and try to stay in touch and as best we can. But, with the rising costs of everything, for us small businesses, we can't continue to throw money at things and just hope that the exposure and the impressions pay off for us. Running a business on hope, as it turns out, doesn't exactly work. I can't pay bills with hope. I wish that my growers and that our glass company and suppliers would take hope as payment, but it's not a thing. And this is not a dig on, the folks that we try to do events with where it doesn't work out, or, having a little bit of these dollar and cents conversations and things that's just like, hey, like, this is just kind of how it is, But there has to be, this is a two-way street, given the rising costs of everything. So with these rising costs and the back and forth that we have for some of these events, again, locally on the road, harvest parties that we are in fact planning this year, the things that we're trying to do to keep people coming out and keep people engaged, how do we mitigate some of that? I mean, some of it is going to be some of these tough conversations because we want to work with everybody and we want to do as much as we can. But we probably spend, like, for us as a small business, we spend tens of thousands, it's probably close to like $100,000 a year just being on the road promoting our wares. Like, it's expensive. It's super expensive for a small business. And, when I look at like our budget, I'm like, yeah, I mean, that realistically, like, that's about right. Like, it's amazing how much we spend to try and get out on the road and do things. But, if we didn't have money coming back in, we wouldn't be able to do those things. So there is that just basic give and take, like, hey, happy to come on the road. Here's kind of the expectation. Here's the expectation when it comes to sales. If we're doing an event locally, like, hey, this is, if we're hosting people in our tasting room, this is what we kind of expect, and this is how we waive tastings for club members or, whatever. We try to be consistent across all those things. So that's kind of the one thing, is like how we just manage it and how we communicate those things. Two is, of course, trying to reduce some of those costs, right? Because right now, in this moment in the wine industry, I'd be pretty confident in saying that, and some of you might know this from being, salespeople for whatever service or good that you provide, that when you start really dialing it in, you figure out kind of what your cost of customer acquisition is, like that will change your life. And right now, I would say the cost of customer acquisition in the wine industry has never been higher. Like, it's amazing how much we have to do, the work we put in, the samples that we pour, the events that we put on to just get someone to buy wine one time, much less that second or third time. I mean, that's the goal. For some of you who have been, longtime supporters in our wine club, that's our goal, is to build this great relationship with you guys, hopefully become friends in that time frame, and keep a good thing going. Like, that's always the goal for us as a small label. But it is just, it's the amount of time, we spend on the road and the money that we spend doing some of these things, something does have to give. So there are two things that can happen. One, I mentioned, we reduce costs of doing things. Like the events that we do, as much as we can, are pretty bare bones. Some of you have attended some of these big kind of grand tastings that we do around the country with other wineries. It's like, hey, we do some catering. We have plenty of wines. We bring, 6 wineries show up, including ourselves. We rent out a space, and it's a couple hours of tasting these wines. Each one of those events costs basically on average like $6,000 to $8,000 to do. And that's just for the event. That doesn't include the travel. That doesn't include the wine samples. That doesn't include the hotels. That doesn't include meals. That doesn't include any of that, our time. That's just for the event. So, if it's $6,000, it's easy math. It's like, okay, every event costs a winery at least $1,000. So, let's say that the trip on a whole is probably going to cost, over three events, $3,000 right there, just to get the events going. And then you have your travel costs, which is probably going to be somewhere around another $2,000, maybe $2,500 or more in some cases. So all of a sudden, like, math really starts to get behind you. So, it can be really tough, and you have to, as a result, sell a lot of wine to cover those costs, right? So, and for me, in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, for every dollar I spend, I want to make 2. Like, just back of the napkin math, right? So if I'm spending, $5,000 to be on the road, I want to sell at least $10,000 worth of wine. Ideally 20. It's right. Like, I'm sorry, I can be a little greedy sometimes. That's the kind of stuff you do have to think about. And now you have to think, okay, well, if we saw 300 people over those 3 events, right? And 10 of them bought wine from us. Or let's say 30, like 10% of them bought wine. 30 of them bought wine. What's the cost for customer acquisition there, right? Like, all in, right? So you can drill that down, like, pretty easily and figure out what it takes from a hospitality standpoint, the cost of, getting people through the door and selling them a bottle of wine or many bottles of wine, right? And you're going to have to make that up in sales, or again, keep something bare bones and, cut costs somewhere. Because we could do these events and cut out the catering, right? We don't think that's fair to you guys, because you show up to a wine tasting and you're just drinking for 2 hours, like between 5 and 5:30 and 8 o'clock. Like, that's dinner hour. We can't do a full dinner, otherwise it would have to be like hundreds of dollars per person to carry that out. We couldn't necessarily do a dinner for 100 people. It's just not going to happen. So, we have to find ways to cut those costs, make it more affordable, hopefully for you guys to attend, keep the tickets relatively as cheap as we can to cover those expenses. And then that way the wine that we sell covers the rest of the trip and gives us some profit on top of that to make it work. Like, does that make sense? I feel like I kind of talk myself in circles with this whole thing. But, that's how we're trying to adapt and do things. It's like, okay, let's keep things as relatively bare bones as we can. We'll make things hopefully as affordable for you guys as to get into. And then from there, hopefully it works out. But if you have a lot of misses, like back to back to back with some of these events, all of a sudden you have to kind of dig your heels and say, is it worth it to continue being on the road? Is it worth it to continue saying, hey, we're going to offer complimentary tastings on these days or during this season? I know for a fact that like our cost of hosting a tasting at the winery is $60 a person, give or take. So the second a group of 4 sits down, I'm out $240. Right? Like that's right? Like that's all of a sudden, like that's I have that in the back of my head with every group that I host. So if that group of 4 buys $200 worth of wine, I've lost money on that. Them as the ropes. So when it comes to the rising costs and adapting to them, whether it's events, whether it's tastings, or any activation that we do in the hospitality world, it's just good to know what some of this stuff is and where you can actually make the cuts that you need to. This is a conversation, going back to how much we are on the road and the cost of our customer acquisition right now. Brittany and I are having really intense conversations about what events are really worth it to go do. What cities do we have, the best chance of, doing relative, affordable events while also making the money we need to make in order to keep going. Right? It is this, I feel like, between us and you guys, the consumers out there and our distribution partners and accounts, it is, you kind of walk this knife's edge, right? Because there might be a certain level of pricing that we present to you guys that just doesn't work. If I say, hey, if we're coming to the market, we're going to do an event at your restaurant, but we need to sell 20 cases of wine. That might be doable. That might not be. If I'm coming to your house and we're doing a private tasting for you and your friends, and I say, hey, we got to do at least 7-10 cases of wine. That might work. That might not. You might. I've had folks that are like, yeah, we'll definitely host you for a tasting. We'd love to have you to our place. And I go, great. Like, here's kind of the idea. Here's, our expenses and things as far as like travel and whatnot goes. But we need you to buy some wine. Like about that seven or so case mark will work for this trip. And they go, oh, well, we're not really sure how much people will buy. We don't really want to put pressure on people to buy. Like, can we just do something more casual? And I have to be the bearer of bad news and be like, no. I can't just, again, fly out here and hope that people will jump in. I need them to know, like, hey, this is like coming out to Napa and going tasting and buying wine, but I'm coming to you. So I'm saving you the plane ticket, the hotel room, the transportation, all the things. There's a purchasing kind of expectation that needs to be set here. So this, like the rising costs of hospitality and all this stuff, I think for all of us, and I think all of you will agree, whether you're a consumer and you're in our wine club, whether you're coming out for our harvest party, whether we're coming to you, whether it's one of our distribution partners or accounts, it's just an open line of communication. Let's figure out, because it's always open for negotiation. I mean, let's be honest here. Like, it's always open for negotiation, but we have kind of a set, like, hey, this is where we're at. And you might be above or below that. And if you're above that, you're like, all right, cool, this is a great deal. If you're below that, it's like, okay, we need to find some way to meet in the middle here. And it just requires some back and forth. And this was the conversation I had regarding this event that we're considering doing locally. I'm like, yeah, this is kind of the amount for this group of people. If you said someone else can do it for cheaper, go with them. Like, I'm not offended. Like, if this client is looking to do it more on a dime and has a smaller budget, then yeah, then you find someone else. Like, I'm not going to be mad about that. Brittany and her wedding planning and what she does, and she's such an amazing event designer and how she pulls things together from a creative aspect and keeps things going. Like, she charges a certain rate for wedding planning services because she knows how much time and effort that she's going to put into it. She has that value. and her cost baked into what she does. And there are going to be people that come to her and say, hey, this is just too expensive. We want to, can we just hire you for day of? And she's like, yeah, sorry, I don't do day of planning. That's not, if I'm coming in, it's because I'm managing a thing top to bottom. I'm not showing up the day of and hoping that I can pull it all together. But I know some friends who are really good at that kind of stuff. It's not my thing, but let me refer you to someone else. It's the very gentle way of saying no, right? But it requires this open line of communication and frankly, just not getting offended. So when it comes to rising costs and things, it's something we all deal with in all of our own businesses and where we work and how we live. Like, we all know how expensive things have gotten, and it requires being frugal at times. Sometimes you can splurge, sometimes you make exceptions, that you have to know where those lines are so that way you can bend those rules or break them as you see fit. Very simply put, the hospitality industry is not for the faint of heart. I feel bad for you guys on the consumer and the distribution and account end because we are, we're all in it. We're all in it and all involved in it in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes it does feel like you're getting screwed, and it sucks because all we all want to do is just bring people together and have a great time. And it doesn't always pan out the way we hope. It is just tough, man. But the great thing about it in the hospitality industry in general is that, we all just are looking to take care of one another. So even if those conversations get a little feisty sometimes, a lot of it is water off a duck's back. Just easy breezy. Let's move on to the next thing. If it doesn't work this time, we'll try and figure it out for the next one. It is interesting though, as we continue to navigate, how and what we do and the marketing opportunities and exposure and all this, it used to be that, it was, if you go back 2019, all the way back to 2012 or so, this stuff felt easy. I don't know about any of you guys who are in the industry maybe listening, but it felt easier. Nothing is coming easy right now over the last, 5-6 years. That kind of that COVID boom of sales and happy hours starting at 11 a.m. rather than 3 or 4 p.m. Everything was rainbows and kittens back then. And now it's just a grind. And some of it is kind of like this health and wellness vibe. There's we've talked a lot about kind of the anti-alcohol movement and things that have really taken root. And I was reading an article, which I'll post, of course, in the description of the video from the drinks business. And it was someone who, I guess he's health wellness dude. I have no idea who he is. Apparently a fairly well-known, and the writer of the article was actually very complimentary of this individual at certain points. But he was claiming that, 3 glasses of wine ruined his life because he had 3 glasses of wine one night. And it went down this rabbit hole of biohacking thing and was it the Aura rings or whatever that track your health and sleep, the whoops that people wear. And I've never had any interest in wearing any of that stuff. The only time I would wear some sort of tracking fitness device is when I was cycling, because when I was working for Cliff Family and cycling was optional, kinda, right? It was a lot of fun, but when you're going up a hill or you're kind of pushing it a little bit, and you feel dog tired, you can't go any harder, and then you look at your heart rate and it's lower than what you were expecting. It's oh, I actually have more in the tank. I can kind of keep. I'm kind of being a little bitch about it. I need to. I can keep going, right? So I kind of get it from the fitness level of hey, I'm trying to figure out where and how hard I can kind of push myself and whatnot. It is an interesting. What I really took away from this article is that. And kind of that wellness kind of push is I'm not opposed to people, you should take care of yourselves. You should get good sleep. You should eat well. You should definitely exercise. You should do all of those things. But there's a great quote in this article that is quite simply, at what point did the performance of wellness replace the experience of being well? And I just thought that was really eloquently put. And it goes on to talk about, social isolation and how it's worsening and that people just aren't going out. They aren't doing things. And they're not being a part of a community as much. And this is kind of more a narrative across younger generations, I think, which I don't necessarily buy it into that. It's hey, people keep saying hey, Gen's, what's the new Gen Alpha, Gen Z, whatever. The young kids are the problem. They're the ones not drinking. I'm I don't see that. Like we have a pretty young consumer base actually. We have a lot of these folks that are coming to our tastings, out to Napa, coming to our events on the road, and being a part of this hospitality experience that we're talking about. And they're worried about being healthy and well, but they also aren't scared of going out and having a good time. So, this seems to be like one of those issues that continues to like point the finger. I think that there is this like zeitgeist of health and wellness, and of course the podcast kind of bro sphere of, no alcohol's, the best for you. And by the way, aren't you doing a cold plunge in the morning? And how often are you in the sauna? And by the way, how much Brazilian jiu-jitsu do you do? Like, there's kind of like this, there's this really big echo chamber online of this wellness community that has kind of driven some of this narrative home. And for a lot of people, they connect with it. I mean, I know, because I'm probably going to try and hit the gym after I'm done recording this. Like, I know that when I go and get a good workout in, like, I feel better after the fact. I also know that after I get a workout in, I'm probably going to eat, like, some protein, eat pretty healthy. I don't want to go have a drink that right afterwards, or I probably don't even want to drink that much that evening either, because my body just doesn't feel like it. But I that's something that I'm kind of like in tune with. Actually talking about cycling in those days, there was nothing like a cold beer after a long ride. Like there is something to that where you get some, your favorite hop and malt infused water, and something bright. It's refreshing. It's a little fizzy. It takes a little bit of the pain away. It takes the edge off, and you're like, that just feels good. Probably not the best thing to do after a lot of exercise, but damn it, it felt nice, right? Anyway, it's all about this balance, right? Like that's what I think. As we see this pendulum swing back and forth, between like, at one point margarine's good for you and butter's bad, and the other point like eggs are terrible for you and now they're good. It's like there are these major swings, and I think the overwhelming majority of people see those swings, just go, oh yeah, this is just kind of this having this moment right now. And I think that's where alcohol is right now. Now, you do see the decline in consumption kind of across the spectrum, but how much is that, an older generation that was a very big generation in terms of the population, really slowing down in their consumption, as kind of naturally you do as you get older, right? You do see younger people coming up, but we talk quickly, in terms of hospitality rising costs and the cost of just everything. It's expensive to live right now. At least it feels that way. It feels more paycheck to paycheck now than I have in a while, which is a little scary, but it just kind of is what it is, I guess, and we're working through it. But, if you don't have like disposable income laying around, like, it's gonna be really hard to go out and pay $24 for a cocktail in the city, right? Even like, shoot, there's a great wine and beer bar here in town, and I love them dearly. We're there all the time. A pint's $10. It's like, okay, like at 2 beers, you're out $20 plus tip, you're out 24. It's like, oh God, like it adds up really fast. So, there's some socioeconomic stuff here as well that I think we need to unpack and unravel, especially when we're talking about like younger generations, people kind of want to come up in their careers. Because I know when I was in my 20s, early 30s, I wasn't making that much money. Shoot, my early 20s, I was living in low-income housing. I was making less than $24,000 a year when I moved back to Napa. Yeah, I was broke as shit. And, there were those moments where it's like, okay, do I buy extra groceries or I just keep paying my rent? Like those are the conversations you get to have at that level, right? So you gotta sort it out. And I'm very lucky, like going back to kind of the performance of wellness and the experience of being well, I certainly, what disposable income I had, tried to spend that money on being well from maybe a fitness level at a certain point and eating as best I could. Man, I still love those cup of noodles so much. But it was also making sure that I was spending the time out and about and doing things. Because this, as this article points out, the great thing about wine is that it has always been about bringing people together. And in fact, say it about beer and cocktails as well. It's not just wine. Like it's a community thing. Like drinking alone kind of sucks, right? Like every once in a while you get home from a long day, you just want to drink, and you're like, all right, cool, that's fine. But when you're out camping, when you're at the restaurant, when you're at the bar, whatever, you're in your backyard, it's great to have a glass or a bottle of something and enjoy life for what it is, right? Like that's really the thing. And I couldn't agree more with this article that this is kind of the thing that we as an industry can really help promote for people and bring it back into the fold and be like, hey, this isn't about going out and getting bombed. Like that's not the goal. Yeah, the effects of alcohol is nice. That nice little euphoria, it's great. You lose this little social lubricant. You don't have to feel like me. I always feel like the oddball in the crowd. I always do. So having a glass of wine or a cold beer or something to help loosen up a little bit, like it helps me immensely. Yes, it's absolutely a crush, but it doesn't mean I need to get shit-faced to feel that way. I can have one or two and be just fine, right? And I can stop at a certain point, right? And of course, there are certainly people that can't stop and probably need to rethink their relationship with alcohol in general. Like, okay, fine, right? That's going to be a thing. It's not for everybody. We get that. But the social aspect of it, when it comes to this hospitality experience and making it more accessible as best we can, I mean, I think that, or at least furthering that story as best we can is probably the next best thing that we can do given this downturn. You know, because if we can get more people involved in what we do, I mean, that could help fix some of these rising cost issues. It really could. Because if we grow, you know, that hospitality stuff will help fall into line as well. We can start to reduce our costs by doing more, right? Because it's just you start doing your bulk deals. This is, you know, as I'm got my bottling in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, we get price breaks here, here, and here. For these items, I need to make sure I order this much of that, this much of that, this much of that. And the same is true of anything in the world, right? Like, if less people are going out and being communal, it's going to cost more per person. Going back to customer acquisition, it's going to cost more per person for that bar to operate, right? Plain and simple. If the bar's full more often, they can work on slimmer margins and keep things moving forward, right? It becomes a volume proposition. Now, if you're trying to be the cool hipster place where there's only 20 seats, yeah, you might have to charge 20 or bucks a cocktail, 18 bucks a cocktail or whatever. And make sure that people are ordering like 2 at a time. I don't know. I've never run a bar, so I don't know how the math works specifically for that situation. But you know, you can play the volume proposition, and between creating the community and kind of this little battle with this wellness kind of cult, as the article puts it, that we're having, you can start to fix or at least manage some of these rising costs in hospitality a lot more. At least I think so. It makes sense in my head, but you know, could be wrong. Wouldn't be the first time. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Wind Up Podcast. I'll be back next time to continue the conversation. Until then, be sure to like and subscribe to the show. Follow us on our social networks. That's YouTube, Instagram, the Book of Face, and the social network formerly known as Twitter. The handle for all of those is at MTGA Wines. Submit topics for the show on our website. That's mtgawines.com. Just scroll down to the bottom of that homepage and you'll see the form to fill out and submit questions our way. Until next time, have a great day, week, weekend, month, whatever the case may be, and we'll see you next time here on the Wind Up Podcast. Cheers.